there's two places I wanted to go, and I guess I'll maybe let you pick as far as your area of interest or whatever is gauging you. You mentioned brain health and how the brain is mostly fat. So I wanted to get into this new concept that Alzheimer's and dementia, what is now being called diabetes type 3, which is fascinating, especially because we were told for so long to worry about cholesterol. And a lot of our parents that are
Mm,
our aging still have this dated model of low fat, low fat, low fat.
mm,
And I get on my mom about this all the time. And I'm like, you are at the age where you need to be eating some fat. Like, put the butter in, like the grass fed butter in your food. Eat some of the fat with the steak. Get the ribeye instead of the fillet, but it's not being heard or absorbed at all. So that was the one. The other one goes to kind of back to mitochondria health and epigenetics and with the genes being able to turn on and off, because there's this thing that's also becoming very mainstream, which is the supplementation of NMN and NAD plus, as far as I forget what they're called, but they're the markers that affect the epigenetics.
telomeres.
What is it?
So the telomeres, it
Not
protects the
no, not that. It starts with an S, I think. It's something that it decides whether
sirtuins.
and hmm?
The sirtuins.
Yes, that.
There we go. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I knew
yeah.
you would know. So whether or not those supplements have been tested, how do you find an authentic supplement that's not just baking powder? But those are the
Mm.
two places, like, that's my fork in the road that I don't know where I want to go right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about the epigenetics part, and then we should have time to talk about cholesterol too. I mentioned the innate intelligence several times during this interview, and I want to just explain kind of where that is and where I got that from. For many years, scientists and doctors believed that the innate intelligence, meaning the intelligence, the wisdom of your body, was your DNA, and it's all about the DNA. And that premise kind of means like if you have cancer that runs in your family, or diabetes, or autoimmune disease, it's just bad luck, right? Obesity, genetic problem. It's just bad luck. It's not your fault, was the premise. And then a gentleman named Dr. Bruce Lipton came on the scene, who wrote, a great book, Biology of Belief. And I interviewed him on my podcast, and he was sharing this. He destroyed that premise. So what he did, he would look at cells, and he would look at the DNA nucleus and look at all the other amazing things happening in that cell. And he wanted to find out, where is that intelligence? Is it the DNA? Are we doomed by our genetics? Or is our DNA our destiny, or is it something else? So he would remove the DNA nucleus from cells and observe what would happen next. And the cells went on to function just fine for months before it went into this apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. And he duplicated this over and over and over. And other scientists who challenged him duplicated and saw the same thing, which goes to show that it is not the DNA that is running the show. The intelligence is not your DNA. It's just a blueprint. Something needs to be told to turn on a gene or turn it off. So he wanted to determine, all right, if it's not the DNA, where is it? And then he would look at that cell membrane, which we spoke about earlier. He would remove the membrane, instant death. Remove the membrane, instant death. So it's that membrane. Life begins and ends in that membrane. That's what tells the DNA to turn on genes and turn off genes. So there's an environmental stimulus that tells the DNA to perform a certain job, to produce certain proteins, and then that gene becomes expressed. But it starts with the environmental stimulus. So that could mean the food you eat, the thoughts you think, the supplements you take. It all is an environmental stimulus. The toxins around you, that's what's determining whether or not genes are getting turned on or turned off. So the great news is that your genes are not your destiny. A skilled poker player might be dealt a bad deck of cards, but a skilled poker player will become victorious. They'll know how to use those cards. So if you have a bad family history, that doesn't really mean much. Dr. Bruce Lipton believes that 99% of all disease is epigenetics, which literally means above the gene.
Hmm.
It is communicating with that gene, and that's the external environment. And the most important thing here, I believe, is that Dr. Bruce Lipton has proven that your thoughts have a frequency that have the ability to penetrate your cell membrane and tell your DNA to produce certain proteins, good or bad. So if it's a negative thought, it's going to produce inflammatory proteins. If it's a positive, loving, grateful, abundant thought, your DNA produces anti-inflammatory proteins. So if the average person has 60,000 thoughts per day, which they do, that means we have 60,000 opportunities to put the body in this anti-inflammatory healing state every single day. That is the greatest biohack that I could ever share on your show here. So in a nutshell, like, we have control over those genes. It doesn't control us.
Mhm. No, that's so beautiful.